Well, good morning. Welcome to the service webinar for this month. We're excited to see so many familiar faces and work through a newer topic with you today. Before we begin, I want to bring your attention to the chat, which you can use to ask questions throughout the meeting. As always, we have several team members who will answer questions as you ask them, and then pass along questions that are relevant for the entire group for a Q&A session that we'll have at the end. If you do have to leave before you receive a response, our customer support team will reach out to you afterward. And with that, let's get into it. Our plan for today is to go over the feature for impact tracking. Volunteers contribute more than just hours to your organization, and Service can help you keep a record of this. Impact tracking is a great tool to capture some of the other metrics that are relevant to your organization, such as the number of boxes packed, meals delivered, miles driven, or really any other metric to which you can assign a number for volunteers or staff to record. So we're going to take a look at creating new impact tracking items, assigning impact tracking to specific opportunities, how this metric is recorded by staff or volunteers, and then finally how to report on volunteer impact. So the first thing to start off with is creating a new impact tracking metric. This is done from the main dashboard as you're logged in as an administrator under Opportunity Management. There's a menu item in here for Impact Tracking Management. In this menu, you can generate new metrics, and you can do this as needed, and you can create as many as you need. And again, these can represent a wide variety of different things, but the general idea behind impact tracking is that you're recording additional numerical metrics. So basically numbers that you can attach to your shifts or to what your volunteers are contributing. This can take a wide variety of appearances. It can be things like the number of grocery bags prepared, or pounds of food sorted, or number of miles driven for maybe like a mobile pantry, or even just to participate in a shift. So these kinds of things that I have in here as examples already. But it could also represent other different types of metrics, like maybe you have, for example, a mentorship program, like a reading mentors program, and you want your mentors to keep track of how many pages they read with their volunteers or with the mentees, or how many new vocabulary words were learned. You could also have people keep track of, how many garbage bags they filled during a cleanup, or the number of miles of trail that they walked or cleaned up, pounds of noxious weeds removed. All kinds of different things can be represented through impact tracking. That can even potentially dip into the idea of allowing people to provide a shift rating. So this is just a number attached to the end of a shift, and you can allow volunteers to record it in different manners. But I have seen this used in the past to keep track of a shift rating, essentially, letting people give you feedback on how a shift went. So the idea here is you're just generating these impact tracking metrics. And to do so, all you do is create a name for the metric, give it a description, and then determine if it's enabled or disabled. And of course, if you're making something new, that's going to be enabled. If this is something that you no longer want to utilize or don't need to track anymore, you can disable it. What that will do is it will hide it from the different places where you could enable impact tracking, but you can still report on disabled metrics. So once you've created an impact tracking metric through here, it needs to then be enabled on a particular opportunity. And of course, these aren't going to be relevant necessarily to every single opportunity that you create. So each opportunity has its own settings pertaining to this. So if we go into create a new opportunity under the Opportunity Management heading, under Advanced Options, so towards the bottom, you will see a section for logging impact. Now this only appears if you have a metric that you have created. So if you're looking at creating a new opportunity right now and you don't see this section, that's because you need to go and create an impact tracking metric first. And once that's been generated, you can pick which of these items are relevant to this particular opportunity. So of course, it doesn't have to be all of them. It could just be one. And then you can also choose how this is logged by volunteers. Now there's 4 options in this setting called Log Opportunity Impact. The default setting is admin only, so administrators will be able to record information on behalf of your volunteers or on behalf of the shift as a whole. but volunteers won't be able to record this or even see this on their own. The other options, online, on-site, both, those all affect how volunteers can engage with this information. And you might recognize this language. This is the same sort of language that's contained when you're setting up a service project and you're choosing how hours can be logged for a service project. So if we go down to impact tracking again, you have online, on-site, and both. Online means that volunteers can log into their shift retroactively, or log into their account, I should say, after the fact and record impact associated with this opportunity. And again, this could be a project or it could be an event. So online, I think of this as retroactive. Volunteers are recording this information after the fact. On-site would allow volunteers to record hours in situ. So they're doing this through the sign-in console when they sign out from their shift. And again, this could be with service projects or with events. But basically, when someone signs out of their shift, it will ask them to record their impact tracking metrics, whatever you have selected here, and they'll basically be doing that on site. And that can be through the standard sign-in console or through mobile sign-in. And then, of course, both enables both of those options. Now, once you've enabled impact tracking within an opportunity, of course, you need to be able to record that information. So let's walk through what these different options look like from those different perspectives, starting off with admin only, or really just the admin perspective. No matter what you select through here, administrators can always record impact tracking metrics on any of your events where that's enabled. And that's done through your opportunities. So if you go into search and manage existing opportunities under the opportunity management heading, from here you'll see all of your open events. You could search for something by name, but once you locate the event that you're interested in engaging with, you can click into view the registered volunteers. And when you do that, on the right-hand side, next to every registration, you will see this log volunteer impact icon. By default, this icon is black, meaning that information has not been recorded here. When information has been recorded, it will be turned gold. So that can either be done by you or the volunteer. Now, when you click on this icon, it'll ask you to input this information. So you can input the number. In my case, I selected that for this event, pounds of food sorted and grocery bags prepared. So I can input those numbers through here. I can add notes as well, which volunteers also have the option to do this. And I can do that for both of these. Now, if a volunteer is recording impact through here, they do need to enter valid numbers. So you have to enter a number in here, even if that number is 0. So you'll just need to make sure that that does have a number. You don't have to include notes. That is optional. But like I said, once you've recorded that, that'll change the color of that icon. And then that information, of course, is something you can search by and report on in the future. And we'll get to that more in a minute. But from the admin perspective, this is really where you engage that. From the volunteer perspective, again, there's kind of two main places where a volunteer can engage this information. One of those being online. So again, more of that retroactive idea. They're recording the information after the fact. So if we switch over to my volunteer access level, and in case you didn't know this, this is a really useful tool. When you're logged in as an admin, you can switch to view the system as a volunteer using your own profile. Now you can assume the identity of profiles in Service as well. So if you want to assume the identity of a specific volunteer, you can do that. But if you just want to quickly see the system from the volunteer perspective, you can use this profile icon up here and switch to view the system as a volunteer. Now in here, if impact tracking is enabled for a particular opportunity that is relevant to me, then I will see the option to record impact tracking. So that is turned on for one of the events that I'm registered for, as well as actually some of my group members. So in my system, I'm a group leader and I have access to manage some of those profiles. But you can see here, so this is just that menu. Let me go back here quick. Under registration management, you'll see the option to record or update volunteer impact. And again, this only shows up when it's relevant. And when someone clicks on this, they'll be able to see what shifts they can record impact for. And they basically just click on this update impact and input the exact same information that we already had in there. Sorry, this is saying update because I've already input that data. If I hadn't input that data, it would ask me to log impact, like this green icon here. So that's what it looks like for volunteers to do this retroactively. Again, very similar to what we see from the admin side. They're kind of just going in and inputting their numbers, potentially some notes, and logging that data directly. Now, the other option for volunteers for logging impact is something that we will see from the sign-in console. So I'm going to switch back to the admin side of the system so that I can open up the sign-in console. So under Opportunity Management, if we go into Sign-in Console or Kiosk, I'm going to open this up in sign-in mode, which is generally how you should have volunteers engage with this. And if we go ahead and try to sign in for my shift, I'm going to have to answer these questions real quick, which incidentally, we did do a webinar on this topic, but if you have questions about the sign-in console itself, of course, feel free to ask those as well. So within the sign-in console, of course, a volunteer can sign in for their shift. That's not going to ask someone to record impact. Where someone is going to be asked to record impact is when they are signing out. So if I come back here and go to sign out from my shift, because I have it turned on for this event, when I go to sign out, it's going to ask me to input, in this case, the number of miles driven, and then also potentially some notes. So I can input that information directly, log impact, and sign out, and that will record both my hours as well as the impact that I input directly. So again, this is the on-site option. This is done directly through the sign-in console or through mobile sign-in, whatever you choose to have volunteers use for that opportunity. So logging impact is relatively straightforward. It's not particularly tricky for volunteers to do so. It just depends on how you have it established in the opportunity, what action they will take, and kind of what road they go down to do so. From the admin perspective, you can always go in and update that information. Now, there's a certain situation that I want to mention as well, and that would be if you want to do more of like a shift roll-up. Maybe you don't want volunteers to input the information themselves. You just want to indicate after an event how many of that particular metric were recorded for everyone. The way you would do that is just tie that to one of the individuals who is registered for that event or for that shift. So just go in and log impact and input the totals for that particular shift. You might also include notes that say shift total so that when you report on that later, you can see that information more laid out. But it is going to be tied to obviously this one specific person, but that's not really going to affect your system too much as long as you are basically just running reports on a shift basis. If you do care to see how many pounds of food an individual sorted, then you would want to parse that out by person. And we'll get into a little bit later kind of reporting on that, running searches on that, and then even assigning awards based on that data. So there's some good reason to have individuals record that information themselves. But of course, in some cases, that's not necessarily possible. If you are just recording after the fact, okay, as a total, we did X. As a group, everybody had contributed this amount. The way you would do that is just assign that to a single individual in the shift. And then when you run reports, it'll be associated with that particular shift, and that's kind of the relevant information anyway. So again, there's not another place to dump shift totals. You basically just put that on one person who is registered. Make sure it's someone who was actually present, so you don't go and mark no-shows later or things like that. But that would basically just be attributed to one person at that point. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is kind of reporting on recorded impact. So basically where you can report on that information and different things that you can do with that data. And the first thing I want to talk about is actually creating awards. I mentioned this, but under attribute management, if you go into the award inventory management, you can generate awards in here that utilize your impact tracking metrics as the assignment mechanism. So for example, if we scroll down here, I have a couple that I created based on those impact tracking metrics. And they're generated in the exact same manner. You essentially just define the assignment using that impact tracking metric. So like I have, for example, a long distance driver, someone who's driven over 100 miles with the mobile food pantry events. So to create this award, again, you just give it a title, give it a description, pick which icon or badge you want to utilize, and then choose your assignment. So in my case, I said they've driven over 100, miles, right? So impact miles driven. And then in my case, I wanted to do lifetime. But those can also be a part of the other kind of different milestones or different time periods that you're searching for this information. If you want to give people credit based on, contributing 100 miles every month or every year, you could do that as well. In my case, I just chose to do lifetime. So you can create awards based on this information. And of course, this is searchable data as well. You can find people who have this award. You can find people based on when they received this award. And that's going to be done using the advanced volunteer search. So if we go into advanced volunteer search, you can search by awards and you can search for people who earned a particular award within a certain time frame or just in general. Another search you can do related to impact tracking is if we go down to participation options, you can run searches for volunteers that have more than, exactly, less than, or between a certain number of, may have looked at this earlier, you may have seen this earlier for time served or hours, but you can also run these searches on impact tracking metrics. So same kind of idea, but again, this is driven by the individual. So if you're doing things like shift totals, this won't necessarily be that useful of a search for you to run. You're more likely just going to be running reports on this data, not necessarily searches on this information. But if you do have individuals track that data themselves, logging it after the fact, or in situ or on site, then this can be pretty useful data to search through. And again, those can be tied to date ranges as well. Okay, so apart from searching, you can of course report on this data as well. And there are two specific reports that I want to point out. So if we go under volunteer management into report management, specifically I want to talk about the custom participation report and the event or project participation report. The custom participation report you may be familiar with is by far the most flexible report in the system. It allows you to use queries from different parts of the database to influence who and what shows up in this report, as well as pick between a bunch of different items in the database itself to be included in the report. And part of this is, if we scroll down under the high detail section, you can select to include opportunity impact. So this report, again, you could run a search to limit who's showing up in this, but in my case, let's just do all my volunteers, all my opportunities within the last month. And if we go ahead and run this report, this is going to give us a spreadsheet. And I only really selected to include those metrics, so there's not much other data being included. Let me zoom in here a bit because it's kind of small. But you can see we have columns for grocery bags prepared, miles driven, pounds of food sorted. All of those also have the associated notes if those were added in at any point. And then if we scroll down to the bottom, we'll get totals for that data as well. So we can see the total number of volunteers, total number of grocery bags prepared, miles driven, pounds of food sorted. And then of course, alongside that, participation count, so number of registrations essentially, and total number of hours. So this report can contain that data as sort of a roll-up. Pretty useful if you're just looking for a date range. And again, if you are recording this information by volunteer and you do care to see how many your totals are for each person, you can do a low detail report, and that'll give you a summary for each person as well. The previous version that I just showed you also contained basically every registration as kind of its own row. That's how that report is run. But you can see in this case, it's giving me a total for each individual within each of those metrics. And of course, I could sort by these columns as well. So the other report type for this is the event or project participation report. And this can be either a Word document or a spreadsheet. I'm going to leave this as a Word document here. If we go ahead and run this report, this can be run in different detail modes, essentially. So you can choose what you want to run this for. So maybe I just want to run this for the number of miles driven. I can run that report. And then this will essentially just give me a total for kind of the events that took place within the date range that I was searching. And that's at the top of the reporting page. But then it gives me kind of what events took place, how many volunteers, how many miles were driven, and then I get a total at the bottom of the report as well. So in my case, this is just one particular event. But if it spanned across multiple different events, I would see all that data represented through here. So again, if you're just looking for quick totals, this is pretty useful. This was on the low detail version, but you could also choose to run this in high detail if you want to see every registration and the impact that each person kind of provided throughout the course of that. All right, so those are kind of the reporting options available within impact tracking. And we really did kind of walk through from start to finish how to create impact tracking metrics, how to associate those with events, how to run searches by that information, how to apply that data within the events themselves, both from the admin perspective and the volunteer perspective. So pretty short and sweet topic for today. And it looks like all the questions that came through got answered by our team directly. Of course, I always love to point out our customer support team. If you do have further questions on this topic or any other topic, you can use our customer support tool. When you're logged in as an admin at the bottom of the page, click on Need Help. From here, you can type in a term if you want to learn more about something specifically. We have a lot of articles in here, and a lot of these articles have videos attached to them as well. So there's a lot of resources in here. But regardless what you've searched by, you can always click Contact Us to submit a support request and engage with our support team directly. So feel free to use this whenever you need, really on any kind of topic, not just impact tracking, obviously. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure to see you in the chat. I know I've met with a lot of you directly, so thank you so much for joining. We as a team are grateful for the work that you do throughout all the different organizations and communities that you're serving and impacting. Really partnering with you is one of the most satisfying aspects of our work. If you do have any questions about our content today, again, feel free to reach out to our customer support team. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.